Am I sharing the right thing? Yes.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, I'm Anto Budiarjo. This is Monday Live. This is something that we do Monday afternoons at 3. Profiles of the panelists are listed on mondaylive.org. Just a reminder that views expressed here are personal, not of any company or organization. And do post questions, comments, and other dialogue on the Zoom chat. This deck is on mondaylive.org in case you want any of the links that we show on it. It looks like this week and probably the next couple of weeks we're going to be a little light as we are in the middle of the dog days of summer, which I just discovered is actually a specific set of dates between July 3rd and August 11th. Didn't know that. Anyway, now we don't.
That makes true. Yeah.
Okay, so our topic for this month is overcoming barriers. We have 3 weeks. This is the first of the 3 weeks, so we'll have interesting conversation about that. And our agenda today, our normal chit chat, and then talk about overcoming barriers, and specifically we want to talk about the barriers of technology adoption and see how far that takes us into understanding what's going on and have open discussions. And we start with Ken, but Ken is not here. Are you here, Ken? He did send me an email saying that he may be late. So anybody care to speak to what Ken's talking about? Mark?
So basically, I'll pretend I'm Ken. So our July 11th, our July issue is out, and lots of different topics, but the main subject was in and around ESG, kind of following Monday Live's discussion of what we had last month. And I've read a couple of the articles in there, some really good articles and perspectives on the whole ESG and whatever. And so don't know what the August theme is going to be, but you all know how to get a hold of automated buildings, and I encourage you to go there and take a look at some of these articles.
Okay. ESG are us.
Yes.
I wonder if he got the permission from the former Toys R Us to use that.
Okay, so thank you, Ken, aka Mark. John is also not with us today because he's traveling, but he sent us these 2 articles, both on Promodo. The first is about the trend that we've been talking about on and off for a number of months of commercial real estate landlords, property owners that are considering changing their properties into residential. So that's very interesting, and this is a very specific one about a residential building in Manhattan in New York. So that's interesting. And the other link that is provided here is again another theme that we've talked about with respect to ESG and the whole sort of climate disclosure, and specifically about real estate's the real estate industry's reaction to what the SEC is planning to do. So I haven't actually read that second article, but that should be interesting.
The residential conversion is not a new concept for us, right? I mean, we've been doing lofts conversions for a long time. When you think about, especially back in the day when the commercial buildings were small rise buildings that got turned into loft developments that were really popular with the kids and the students and stuff. So it's interesting that we're cycling around to that same thing, albeit with much larger real estate properties, I guess. But the concept's still the same.
Yeah, this one is a 30-story building in 55 Broadway in Manhattan. So it's a pretty significant.
Yeah, I mean, we've been turning old cotton mills and cannery mills and all those things into residentials for decades or centuries, if not. It's just the new type of building that we're doing it to.
And sort of related to that, my son lives in Brooklyn, and he was telling us over the weekend that his lease is due up in the next couple of months, and it's gone up $1,000, which is
Yes.
like 33%, which is like, wow, that's kind of scary. So this morning, I actually started to dig around, see what's actually going on in New York. And that is not unusual. Look at these stats. This is Brooklyn. This is the average. These are 2-bedroom apartments. This is the average rental in all of these places. It's nuts. And even more nuts is this.
Yeah.
This is year on year. And so my son's 33% isn't actually abnormal, given this.
And so just to add to that, in fact, interestingly enough, also Brooklyn, my son and his wife, they just left. They were in Crown Heights there, in fact. They were where they lived for the last 4 or 5 years. They literally just left, drove out of Crown Heights last weekend, and are now living in Santa Fe. Moved straight across the country and got the house and the land and everything else for well under what they were paying at Crown Heights. So there's a bit of an exodus happening as a result.
Well, Brooklyn has been for the last year and a half, 2 years, the it place to live in the New York metropolitan area. So I think beside what's going on with respect to, rents and what we're seeing across the board in the US, Brooklyn in particular, because it is the spot to be at within the New York metropolitan areas, as I mentioned.
And it's a natural place for people who work in Manhattan to live, right? Because of the proximity. It's either that or New Jersey. And let's not talk about New Jersey. So that's what's going on. Just wondering, Roger, I haven't been keeping track of rental type properties in London. What's going on over there?
Yeah, similar story. And one of the changes is that going back to the Thatcher period, she encouraged people to buy their houses. So everybody bought houses. But in Europe, everybody kind of rents up until they're in their mid-30s. And what's been happening here in the UK now has been generally a drift back to that now. So in the cities now, the rental prices have just been going up astronomically because people are staying, and also, they're having children much later, so they're delaying, moving out of cities when they can do. So subsequently, they're earning more, and therefore the rental prices are going up dramatically. Exactly the same thing in the city centers.
Well, it's another thing that I think is driving this isn't it the Generation Z? I don't know, whatever I know I'm not part of that generation. It seems like they don't want to own, they don't want to buy a house, or they don't want to buy a condo. They would rather rent. And I think that has a lot to do with it as well.
But also the other thing is that if you wanted to buy, obviously mortgage rates have gone crazy. Right? It's gone up significantly. Now the interest rates is no longer zero. So that I'm sure has an upward impact on that. But
mind you, they're nowhere near when we were buying houses.
That's true. Yeah,
we were way up in the double digits and stuff.
Yeah, I remember paying 15% for a mortgage. That was,
wow, I remember numbers of 20 almost that were edging up on.
Oh, interesting. Just kind of related to that, I saw a chart that said what it takes to be wealthy in the major metro areas in the US, and it says that if you're to be considered wealthy in San Francisco, you've got to have a net worth of about 5 million, whereas New York it's about 3.5. But Chicago and Atlanta it's about 2.5. So it's kind of, San Francisco is still way out there compared with the US and Washington, which are about the same at about sort of just over 3 million.
Which is why they have the homeless problem that we have over there.
So,
all right, so let us move on and stop depressing ourselves.
yeah, a couple other stats there was on the same sort of thing they were looking at, and just, I guess it affects our industry as much as everybody's, but funding of new businesses and basically general funding was down almost a quarter on the quarter. So about 23.5% deals and funding were dropped over that, the last quarter by literally 23.5%. So and it's been on the slide really since Q4 last year. So it actually means that that throwing away money at new ventures and new businesses is really coming to an end. The other stats I saw were that remote hires are now outpacing in-state hires. So it says 62% of startup new hires have been out of state. And the other thing to watch for in businesses is that everybody's inventory has been climbing dramatically, and I think they'll put pressure on businesses, because they've been having problems getting stock and bits and pieces. They've been driving up the inventory, but I'm sure the accountants in businesses will start looking at that and saying, okay, time to start cutting that down, especially as we got, kind of inflation beginning to run away with us as well. So be interesting to see the change in some of the businesses.
Yeah, actually, that's something I read just yesterday too, Roger, in that a lot of the supply chain issues that we've been faced over the last 12 plus months has eased up a lot. And as a result, inventory is starting to increase significantly. People are looking to do sales.
Yep, and but the finance guys are going to start looking at those books and going, hey, we need to get our inventory down. So hopefully they'll start balancing out.
Okay, let's move on to overcoming barriers. And we discussed this last week, and we wanted to talk about the first barrier we want to talk about is really the technology adoption. And there are obviously different types of barriers that we can discuss also this week. And as far as technology adoption, I just thought I'd put this up just to remind ourselves. Technology adoption is it's a science. It's not something that is unknown, right? This life cycle has been around for decades now, and I think most of us will sort of relate this to the chasm, crossing the chasm, which is really what happens between the early adopters, between the green and the blue, which is normally where technology fails, where technology and companies tend to die. Just sort of keep that in mind. A couple of people who are not on this call today because they're traveling came up with a number of comments here from Bill. This is in the context of overcoming barriers, and I can imagine the Bill sort of saying, get the hell out of our own way, as being sort of one of the things that we should be thinking about. He's obviously been talking about context a lot, and we've done that on Monday Live. And he kind of, not sure I totally get this. He feels that startups actually help adoption, although he thinks it's counterintuitive. I think what he's saying is startups tend to do things that is on the left-hand side of this curve, and therefore they're sort of pushing things. They're always constantly pushing stuff towards the right. I think that's a good point. Any sort of thoughts on that, on Bill's perspective?
Maybe what he's saying there is that there are so many of them coming up with new ways of financing it with SaaS and just new ways of getting, but most of that, of course, those startups are dealing with some stuff that really is alien to a lot of our customers, which is, the cloud data and the application service applications that go with it. And maybe he's suggesting that those startups are helping, the companies actually adopt that more than we would, because we haven't, some of the bigger companies and traditional companies haven't always been able to go there because they've been more focused on the on-prem stuff.
So another way maybe to say that, Roger, is the startups are typically over here on the right, on the left, and the buyers, especially buildings related, are typically probably in the late majority.
All right. Yeah.
Right. So that's one of the beauties of this life cycle, is that if you have a product that's like that, you can't sell it to customers that are there. It's just not possible. It's just not doable. That's the whole thing about this, is you've got to be in sync with your customers.
I think the other challenge that I have with this chart at the end of the day, Anto, is, I mean, there's, like you said, that this is absolute science. There's nothing that's come along that's changed the science, but is the timeline. We don't see any implied timeline in this chart, right? So, you know, if you go back to the innovator's dilemma guy, you know, when he said, when you talk about, for example, nanotechnologies, right? The timeline from innovation to, you know, late majority is measured in months, right? Versus if you take something like, I don't know, concrete construction, you know, the timeline is measured in years, if not decades. So I think one of the things that we have to come to grips a little bit with in our market is, what are the timelines that you see in this particular chart, right? Are we talking man months, years, decades? And I think that helps put it in perspective too, right?
Agree completely with Anno. And what I'd like to say is that if you look at technology adoption and you use the proxy of building automation in the North American market, what do we have now? 5.5 to 6 million buildings in the United States, commercial buildings. You know, we are at least 40, if not 50 years into the DDC revolution. And we are at about 10% adoption. So if we look at at DDC as a proxy for smarter buildings, we've got very slow adoption. Compare that to the jet engine or the cell phone. These things had very, very quick adoptions. You moved very quickly from innovators to late majority, you know, over a period of 5 or 10 years for jet engines, which was one of the fastest things. Electric light bulbs have even been slower over time. But it's not crazy to have a 20 or 30 year adoption cycle. But in our case, we're, you know, arguably 40 years into this, and we've got 10, maybe 15% adoption. So I think that's really important, and it plays really into what Anno said.
But you could argue LED adoption has been, you know, that was slightly different, but has actually been fairly quick in timescales comparatively.
Yeah.
Right, LED lighting. I think the other thing is that, and so going back to the note that Bill was saying, was that those innovators or the startups, of course, are probably selling to different customers than, you know, than what's traditionally been done. You know, it's not the standard contractual chain, because these are buildings that are already occupied. You know, they're trying to sell, you know, space management and all sorts of other stuff, which is the occupied building. It's not the construction phase. And so there's two different things here, but they are classed as being in our marketplace because they're to do with buildings. But you know, the traditional audience has always been, hey, we put in a building automation system into a building, and that goes in the construction bit, and then you try to get the maintenance afterwards. And most people then end up doing that as part of breakdown maintenance rather than routine maintenance and so on. So there's very little adoption afterwards, whereas these innovators who are doing the startups are kind of jumping straight into the REITs and the occupiers and the people who are actually in the buildings, and they are occupied after the construction phase.
And the thing that I didn't mention earlier, that when I mentioned that you can't sell a yellow product in a red market, is that you can obviously sell a yellow product in a yellow market, and there is a market for yellow things, and it's actually this chart actually sort of highlights that. And the reason they buy it, because they like new things, right? Now most, you know, there are some individuals that like new things because they like to experiment, but the majority of building owners would not fall in that category, neither the early adopters.
So I'd like to, on Jim Lee's comment of the cell phone adoption and the jet engine, and I want to bring this up. I'm going to go off the reservation a little bit here, is that I think in our industry in particular, that when it comes to the tech, there's two types of barriers that we face. Yes, it's the quote, the technology adoption barrier, no question. And there's a business barrier. And I think our business barriers affect the technology adoption
Agreed.
level. And when I'm saying the business barriers, it's some that that I hear constantly in my conversations is, one is the fear of failing, meaning, oh, I'm going to select XYZ product, solution, or whatever, and it's going to be installed and it doesn't work or doesn't perform like I expected or it was intended to. That's number one. Number two is making the shift from to a smart building or smarter building seems to be very daunting still as an industry. And if I'm an owner, an operator, is I'm going to ask, where the hell do I start? Where do I begin? I don't know where to begin. Third is that I believe there's a perception that this is a all or nothing approach, that I see all these wonderful case histories of these buildings that does all of this stuff, but I'm not like that. If I'm a building, the majority of our marketplace is not like that. They don't have the capital to do these very prestigious projects. So they go, all right, I can't do it. That's my perception. We're not going to do anything. All right. Continuing on, I think as you know, our industry has evolved, the whole concept of cybersecurity. I think cybersecurity has brought up a barrier now that people are just afraid that we're going to be opening up the door with technology that makes my building smarter. Also, that I think there's a perception that it's going to require a lofty investment initially. And, you know, again, we can go down that path. Yeah, you know, sure, it's going to require an investment, but maybe it's truly not as lofty as we think, because you don't have to do the all or nothing approach. But that's, again, I'm just throwing out some thoughts here. The other is where we continually will have this problem is the lack of experienced personnel at the building owner operator level is, I think that's a barrier. Also, you guys mentioned it earlier, the flood of what I call the flood of hip and hype. You know, if I'm reading and, you know, looking, trying to figure out what I'm going to do as a building owner operator, you know, it's just so much stuff out there. Who do I believe? Type of thing. So, you know, instead of trying to get on one camp or the other, I'm just not going to do anything. And then finally, it's, you know, at least I continue to hear this, is the uncertainty of the benefits promised that they're actually delivered. So, and again, maybe, you know, looking at it from a business perspective, as I said, to sum it up, affects the technology adoption side of this.
Yeah, a lot of that, I would argue, it follows this curve, right? This curve is of technology adoption, but it's not being driven by just technology. It's being driven by business decisions and how individuals think about that. So
I want to clarify and challenge, not necessarily challenge, but clarify this. Jim, you said there's, and I agree with you, there's 5 to 6 million potential buildings out there in the United States that could be proxied for the building automation. Okay. And we think that 10 to 15% of them have building automation. So are we saying that 85 to 90% of them have what? Thermostats?
Yeah, and I think that, so if you look
But just
at
be clear, is that they're running with just thermostats?
Steve, if you look at them, the data that I'm using to come up with these numbers is the CBEX Commercial Building Energy Consumption Survey number from the
Okay.
Department of Energy.
Okay.
And what they show is that, yes, a lot of it's thermostats,
Mhm.
but, you know, a significant number of buildings are not air conditioned. right? And a lot of industrial and commercial buildings, are basically vehicle garages or warehouses that
Yeah.
that aren't conditioned whatsoever, right?
Okay,
Storage facilities. So there's, take $1 million out for that. And then a lot of things just have thermostats, and a lot of buildings don't have air conditioning, right? Or heating for that matter,
really?
depending where they
Okay.
are, right?
So thermostats in 1980 are not thermostats in 2020. Okay, so thermostats, you could argue, are direct digital control devices. They're highly digital. They have operator interfaces built into them. You can do all kinds of advanced configuration in them. So are we maligning thermostats when we make these proclamations?
I guess the difference, Steve, is if there's multiple thermostats in a medium-sized building that are not
Mhm.
communicating and therefore not kind of, doing what should be done in a building, when they're being occupied and stuff like that, they're not actually acting smartly. That's different from when you have one intelligent stat
Right.
in a building, in a smaller building. But if you've got lots and lots of them in a medium-sized building, not communicating and not pulling the whole thing together, probably no, it's not I think they deserve to be maligned because they should be communicating
Yeah. Okay.
intelligently,
Yep.
to some extent.
Did you have some more comments, Steve, or you come back to it?
Yeah. No. Well, I wanted. There's the market that we serve versus the market that's available, right? So the total market is this 5 to 6 million, and what Jim is saying is that some significant portion, maybe it's 1 million buildings, okay, really doesn't have the potential to be smart because they don't have a need to be smart. So the number is not 5 million, it's 4 million, okay? So the market we serve is not the total market, it's this smaller number. And out of that, there's a percentage that are just using thermostats today because they don't appreciate the value of making that building smart and all the benefits that would accrue from it. So I just want to get real clearer about why, in a way, these buildings that are thermostat only, what's that barrier that prevents them from going to a full DDC approach? Because I don't think I could answer that question, to be honest. Why those buildings aren't considering, because there sure as heck are more than enough systems integrators out there selling DDC systems across the United States. And what we're saying is that there's also a lot of systems that are going in basically with a mechanical contractor putting a thermostat on the wall.
Isn't that basically what Mark was listing? All of the different reasons, all the way from risk to not understanding the value, to all or nothing, to cybersecurity. Those are don't they make up the reasons why people are effectively doing nothing?
Yeah, and the contractor or the electrician is putting them in themselves, and you can buy them off the shelf and just wire them up, and they know how to do that. The moment you step up to a building automation system, suddenly they need to start programming stuff, and I think it's just an easy thing for them to do.
Yep.
Well, to change this slightly, I think also there's this challenge of in the adoption of the technology. I think there are the end users and the REITs and some of these people are smart enough now, getting smarter to say, hey, you know what, we do want indoor air quality and some circadian lighting, and we do want human-centric lighting, and we do want some space management and video management. But of course, during the construction, and that really should all be built in right up front, as we know, in the construction phase, so that you can build it in with the building automation or the other systems, so they can to interoperate and also get data together between them. But what happens is then the whole circus of bidding for jobs and reducing the price and the content drops out, and suddenly the first things that get cut are all those things that we may consider, you know, the innovative products and some of those things on the wish list of the customer, because he's got to get it fundamentally done. He's got to get it air conditioned, and he's got to have the lighting and things like that, and may hope that he can come back to it at some stage. And of course, SaaS at that stage of life doesn't really work either through the traditional construction route. So I think there really is an adoption challenge there on the way that buildings are bid and put together at the early stages, when it really should be included, but it's you know, it's knocked out fairly quickly.
Let's look at John's comments, because again, he sent this by email. The hype issue, I think we already talked about that. The experience issue, you were speaking to that, Roger. Procurement, I think a couple of us have talked about that and very passionate about that. Split incentive, we haven't talked about, but is that a well-covered topic, or?
Well, the split incentive is primarily a commercial real estate topic, where the tenants and the owners have different goals in mind. In fact, their goals are somewhat opposing, and that prevents technology adoption, because there's no benefit to either the owner or the tenant for joining in on all this technology.
But
To your point, Jim, our team group, whose responsibility is it if they want to make utilize technology? Is it the tenant or is it the owner?
That depends on the size of the tenant, Mark. If the tenant controls the entire building or a majority of the building, then they can wag the dog. Other than that, it's the owner. And if the owner doesn't see any economic benefit from investing in these technologies to attract more tenants, you know, if the tenants aren't going to care, then the owners aren't going to care.
And lease period comes in as well.
Because part of this too is, as indoor air quality has become more important than ever today, is I get that question asked a lot too, is right, all right, when it comes to indoor air quality now, not building automation, but indoor air quality, is it the tenant's responsibility, because they quote unquote, even though they rent the space, it's their space and they want to ensure their employees have healthy environment, or is it the building owner's responsibility? And again, we've discussed over the years that a smarter building with technology, you get higher rent value for it. You reduce tenant churn. You do all of that, all the value props for the building owner. But again, I think today is who writes the check?
Let's just go back a step on this conflicting incentives, and to your point, Mark, about, you know, who writes the check. I think the other big competing piece that we need to look at is from a technology. We are competing against a lot more newer technologies coming into the building besides the technologies that we bring, right? So where we focus in on comfort and air quality and energy and that sort of stuff, you got to remember, a large commercial, the people are now investing in, you know, room booking systems, so their advanced room, the mobile applications that they've got for their cafeterias, you know, all the way up to what you call it, better tenant management tools. If you go look at Realcomm and look at some of the you know, real estate IT guys and the software applications that they're coming out with to manage tenants. So not only are we competing technologically, you know, to get ahead of what we're doing, we are now also being put in the bucket of other things that the building owner / tenant is considering to take on board, which is also new technology, which is
it's amenity driven capabilities, right?
Yeah.
All about the tenant experience, and that's not something we've historically dealt with.
And we've not, but my point is though, Steve, is that we're now having to compete against those budgets
for the same dollars,
for the same dollars, where those things didn't exist 10, 15 years ago,
Yeah,
right?
right.
And now we are competing against both of those issues.
But some of those
Are they
tenant,
they are just additional ones to what, because you still got to have the BAS system still going in. These are additional facilities to the traditional system, and a lot of people are using the MSI to actually coordinate the interoperability of all those things. I know that you're talking about there, and whether it's tenant billing or it's
Right.
BIM or whatever the customer wants integration with, they're additional too, and I think they are just more. There's more functions and functionality that the customer's requiring, but the MSI is kind of picking up that baton now and doing that integration with those systems.
but go back to Anna, what you just said about the newer technologies, the newer applications for tenant experience. So without our foundational offerings, can you deliver that tenant experience? So part of that is controlling my lighting, controlling my temperature in my space, whatever, is you still need a BAS or some kind of building operating technology to deliver that. Is that a
So-
fair statement?
I don't know. Let me challenge that a bit. Just and it's a good question. I think it's a really valid question, to be honest, and we need to sort of beat it up a bit. But let's just take a weird use case. Let's say electric vehicle recharging environments, right? So another thing a tenant's asking for now is I need the ability to do EV recharging infrastructure within the parking garage, which itself opens up a whole bunch of interesting, and this obviously newer technology. It's not just the charging station itself, but now you've got to deal with how many stations are available. Is there an app that comes with that as a tenant? Can I know where they are? Can I book it? And then there's the whole the building owner has to deal with fitting that out and kitting that out, and there's technology involved with that. You could argue none of that infrastructure has anything to do with building automation, per se, until you roll into the equation of, well, who's going to pay for the electricity and the energy costs, and how do you meter that, and how do you monitor that, and how do you factor that back in, right? So my point is, I think sometimes but the building owner tenant gets a little bit lost they see a simple new technology like EV charging stations. So yeah, we need the latest, greatest EV charging stations. And we're gonna allocate budget from other things like lighting to go do that because we have more tenants asking for that. Okay, great. But then extend that thinking out to, well, what does that mean from cost, energy, who's monitoring that, who's paying for that, how does it get allocated, and all that sort of stuff. And then you roll back into the systems that we get involved with, right, as well. And then who ties all that together, right?
But I would like to push back on what you were saying earlier, Mark, as well, because you made an assumption that we, or this industry that we represent, is the foundation. That's part of your. I'm not sure that's right.
And how and why? What?
Well, I think and let me just extend because I'm in the same horse, right? I think what you're saying is the same thing I think. I think we're losing that ground. We used to be, but we're losing a lot of ground to all this newer stuff, other technologies that are coming in that people see as more fundamental to the tenant experience than it's 72 degrees in here.
Because in the 80s, it's almost like the DDC was the only system that's in a building, in a commercial building. Not even the lights were controlled.
Well, even
Right,
from a
so-
tenant experience, the best you had was faxes and LANs, and that's all we had to worry about.
But now, so it's the BAS was like almost not quite 100%, but the significant portion of all of the technology. Now that percentage is like 3% or whatever, some much smaller number.
That's my point. We've lost a lot of ground on the technology budget, if you will, that went into a building. Before the rest of the technology in the building was pretty minimal. You even think about, another good example is the whole wireless infrastructure that has to go into a building these days, right? Not only just Wi-Fi, but cellular and Bluetooth. You know, there is a whole bunch of new technologies that are going into buildings on distributing wireless capabilities, and I'm sure Steve could talk endlessly about this, into the building structure, which has become a whole tenant satisfaction, right? I want to be able to use my cell phone anywhere, anytime, at any location, et cetera, et cetera. That's become a standard requirement.
Right.
That's not trivial cost of technology to put in the building, and the building owner has to make those balances begin. How much am I paying for wireless infrastructure, EV infrastructure, you know, new signage, you know, infrastructure versus BAS, right? So to your point, Anto, I think we've lost a lot of that technological budget that we've also been fighting for.
Well, is part of, to your argument, a question then is this. Are we shooting ourselves in the foot because we're still, and on this conversation, it's been BAS and it's not BAS anymore. It's more to incorporate all those different applications and all the stuff together. Is it more of a building operating platform or building operating system? I didn't say BAS.
No, I agree.
Yeah,
maybe
so
that's-
Mark, I agree with you. You know, we created last year the Smarter Stack.
Right.
Because our objective here is to make buildings smarter. So where does a building owner go to find out what the hell a smarter building is? Is there any organized group out there, ASHRAE, the government, US government, that defines what is the latest version of a smarter building?
I
It's
don't
up to
think
us to
there
do it.
is, Steve. And now I saw something and I'm trying to look for it. I can't find it. I will, and I can send it to Anto and he can post it on our
My
site.
point, Mark, is that we talk about smarter buildings like we know what it is that we're saying when we say that.
But what I was getting to, yeah, to your point, is now there's what I'm seeing, there's a debate. What is a smarter building and what is an intelligent building?
That's a nuance.
Okay, I saw that. I saw an article over the weekend on that. All right, and for me, is a smarter building the same as an intelligent building? Or to be an intelligent building, do you have to be a smarter building? I don't know.
So I would answer that with Bill Bain's first comment. Get out of the way of ourselves. That's his words.
Yeah.
Because who cares? Who cares whether it's called smarter building or intelligent building?
Intelligent building, right.
Agreed.
Right.
I totally agree. Totally agree.
My problem with this whole discussion is, I mean, we're talking about third and fourth order effects here, when the zeroth order effect is that half of the tenants are going away. So are we going to be fighting for budget with these newcomers? How many of these newcomers are going to survive this impending wave of half of the tenants going away? And should we instead be focusing on markets that are potentially not REIT or commercial real estate driven?
Right.
When we have this dialogue, I mean, the zeroth order effect is the people aren't coming back. I mean, John pointed that out in the article earlier. Everybody sees it all over. So, you know, are we going to try to fight for dollars that we know aren't going to exist, or at least for a long period of time until this market reconciles itself?
But maybe that's Jim, that's the opportunity of all the things that Mark was talking about for people to start looking at, instead of just the traditional stuff they've done. They got to start we got to start adopting a new approach to actually embrace some of the things that are coming along that the customer's expecting. And so that's the opportunity for people who have been in the traditional BAS market, because let's be fair, the controllers are just no different than an air handler at the moment. They're the commodity. The differentiator are the tools, the right. Software tools, the controllers, what used to be DDC and stuff. And of course, smarter equipment and stuff is eliminating some of the BAS as well. Yes, communicating it all together is the part that makes it a system. But I do think that the opportunity is going to be, those that perhaps start embracing a few more things to add in to what they used to provide as standard.
So I was thinking about
the point I
that
was
when-
trying to make is that it's the new technologies that are coming in that are focusing on REIT-based tenants may just be so transient in the market because of the destruction of that market that they might not ultimately have that much effect on what we're doing.
The other way that I was thinking, listening to Anno talking about, we have a decreasing percentage of the technology budget, is that if smarter buildings, or whatever we want to call it, we've settled on smarter buildings for this group anyway, if that describes all of the technology that is actually in commercial buildings, isn't that a way through this? Because an IoT solution that does, I don't know, just monitors restroom faucet, for example, there's no reason why that can't be regarded as being part of technology that's making the whole building smarter. Is that one way of actually aggregating all of those pieces?
It should be, right? And that's kind of been my message, is that it should be. It's, as far as the building owner is concerned, I don't think they separate these things into pieces per se. They look at the whole, right? And they look at the whole and say, what are all the things that I need to do to deliver a smarter building as a whole? And to Mark's point, if we end up just focusing on, in our world, just on the BAS piece, we're going to get relegated down into a smaller piece of that equation, right? Until now, the counter argument, of course, is everything I've said is predicated on the fact that the pie hasn't changed in size, right? That they haven't put more money into the technology pie, right? And there has to be an increase. So when you think about things like EV and wireless infrastructure and stuff, the money has to come from somewhere at some point in time. You can't just keep taking it away from everywhere. So, where does that additional dollars? So if the pie is the same and we're competing for the same pie, then that's a challenge. If the pie is growing and there's more of the pie and we're still having a percentage, I'm okay with that. I don't know that we understand if the pie is the same or growing.
But maybe going back to the core subject here about the gap between adoption and the barriers, is that if the traditional BAS company or people who install or supply them start providing additional things with their solutions, people are used to buying a BAS. If suddenly they're saying, oh yeah, well, as part of it, we have, as part of the room sensor, yeah, there's a people counting thing in there anyway, and we got the software that does it. Suddenly that becomes easier to adopt because it's something that they've already accepted needs to go in, which is the BAS. And then if the BAS guys start, building out their offer to include some of this stuff, then maybe that will help break down, and make it easier to adopt some of this stuff and newer technologies and break down the barriers. I don't know.
I think you're starting to see some of that, Roger, and I actually agree with you, because like even at Realcomm, right? I mean, you saw Honeywell, they just recently acquired this company out of Australia called Sign, right? Which is all about visitor management, touchless visitor management and automatic gates and, pretty cool stuff that wasn't traditionally part of the BAS, space. And so they acquired them just recently, and there's been some other acquisitions from the BAS guys, the big guys, the Honeywell, Johnson, Siemens, Schneider guys, who are actually thinking along those lines. I don't know if you've seen Honeywell, a video of their new head office in Charlotte, right, which is this whole tenant experience video. Pretty cool stuff, right? That BAS is just part of the underlying mechanism that drives that. So Siemens too, I think, is doing. I think they recognise this and are looking to acquire, build, get into the bigger part of how do I get more of the technology pie that's happening out there.
And I think, Anna, they're being forced to, because, the system integrators and everyone else are far more competitive when they're bidding. So, they're not picking up the jobs anymore. So they're trying to find another angle to pick up the business. And, a lot of their business, don't forget, depends upon the maintenance they get afterwards. So that's a double hurt for them to actually not pick up the jobs, because they're losing them. They're also losing their maintenance base.
Yeah, right.
So David just brought up the two magic letters AI in chat. And I'm not even sure where to file that in my head in this conversation in terms of technology adoption, because it's way over on the innovation side. And
I think that's one of those things, and so that will be built in. You know,
Right.
so you buy a chiller and it might have some machine learning or AI, and then whatever else, if your supervisor morphs off site into a cloud solution, then it will be part of the standard offer that's in there. And I think that's the way it will come to market here is you know, that'll just be a progressive thing and be part of the solution rather than being a separate element somewhere.
But
I
does
think
that
it
go
should be
back
integrated.
to what I brought up earlier on? Is that it going to the all or nothing approach?
Do you mean like
Oh, I've got to have
IWMS
AI
or
or else it's not going to be a complete solution or an offering.
Yeah.
Or
I
gotta
think
have
it's going to
whatever,
be.
whatever.
I think it's going to be more like Roger's point, in that AI is just going to be integral into the products and the solutions. We won't even know it's there in a lot of
Yeah.
places, because and
It's-
even today in a lot of the industries,
Yeah.
airline industries,
Yeah.
you know, car industries, it's just becoming an integral part of the technology
It's a how
solution.
thing. Yeah.
It's a how thing. Yeah.
Yeah,
It's
right,
not
yeah.
it's not something I'm going to buy. It just comes with it.
So,
go ahead.
yeah, so, you know, in the smarter stack, the first thing is the purpose, right? That's the first thing. And so I just wrote down smarter buildings are ... Energy efficient, comfortable, physically secure, well illuminated, protected from fire and smoke, responsive to tenant needs, cyber secure, have a lower life cycle cost, support on-site EV charging, and are healthier. Those are the ones that just came off the top of my head in the last 2 minutes. And Mark, you don't have to have them all. It's a menu. You're going to a restaurant, right? Which ones do you want?
I know that, but again, the way the industry is been influenced by the profile buildings goes completely opposite to that, Steve.
I'm just suggesting that we could do some better leadership here for the industry to define what a smarter building is. And I think was it David that just said the BIQ is trying
Yeah.
to
2.0.
do
Yeah.
this? Yeah.
Look at the comment, Steve Jones's comment, right? Which is basically the aggregation of all the technology.
Yeah.
Stop thinking of us just controlling that bit. Start
Right.
thinking about us as being maybe not controlling, but consolidating all of these different things so that it becomes more useful.
Right.
Because obviously the pieces, all of the pieces of technology that buyers, owners are buying, obviously have passed the ROI hurdle.
Mhm.
Right.
Right.
The faucet in the restroom kind of scenario.
But
So
that's the
isn't-
opportunity, Anto. I mean, we've already got when you look, what we do today, we've already got a foot in the door. If we let all the newcomers come in and do it, then bigger fool us. You know, we're already there. We could adopt some of this stuff and actually, you know, be the winners out of this. This is the opportunity, is my view.
Which has been my mantra for the last 2 years, Roger, about the IoT guys, in that they don't sell technology, they sell solutions to problems, and that's how they come in. And they come into they've been clever enough to even ignore the facility guy, and they've gone straight to the business unit that who's trying to solve a particular business problem, right? And they've kind
Roger,
of stepped around us.
Are you suggesting that BAS get redefined as a smart building system?
I think
The
it's
smarter
got the
building.
biggest opportunity to succeed in that, Steve. Yes.
Yeah,
Because we've already got a foot in the, you know,
exactly.
the kind of place, we've already got a foot in the door. We're already providing something that's needed. We've been there for years to add things on that people are beginning to say that, well, I need this, but, you know, I need, like we was talking about EV chargers or IQ. it's not that difficult for us to do, but we
For us to
should,
do, right.
we should be able to offer that sort of
But
stuff.
couldn't we say the same thing about lighting? Because, for example, we were talking at the beginning of this call about the 5-6 million buildings, and most of them don't have any control systems, but they all have lighting. They all
They
have
do,
lights.
but they do, Anton, but they do, you know, traditionally, they've not done that much
True.
interoperability or integration.
Right.
They've been there on their own. And to be honest, it's a very diverse industry where they don't actually use that much intelligence. You know, a lot of it is around the fittings and stuff. That's the major part of
Yep.
where they earn all their money. So there's very little
System.
higher level stuff. that
There's
would
very
put it
little
all together.
systems. There's very little systems in there.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's the same with
Well-
security to some extent. It's isolated.
But that's where people like Acuity want to change the equation, right? I mean,
Yeah.
they look at that as being infrastructure capable platforms, right? Because
Right.
it's there. So, and there are different people looking at it from those different perspectives. If you guys, did you see that company at Realcomm called View that makes the smart glass window stuff? So they make smart glass windows, which, okay, and everyone knows what smart glass windows are all about. But they're coming at it from a different perspective, that if I'm putting in the infrastructure and networking for smart glass, then that can be as well the infrastructure and networking for all the other smart things that are in the building. And they've got a good play because they are part of the construction phase, right? So they are already in place well by the time that the smart technologies discussions come about. Quite clever, you know, on their approach.
So the question is,
And
we
just
are,
if I can close on that, and people that are buying View are just buying glass. They're just
Yes.
replacing glass, that glass instead of some other glass from other manufacturers. So they're not even buying technology in there.
But they are by default, but they don't
Yeah,
know it yet.
that's my point. Sorry.
so do we agree or disagree that at the end of the day, technology exists right now, right this second, to make our buildings smarter?
I don't think there's any question.
Yeah,
Okay,
the technology's here, it's the adoption.
no, I know, I'm just
Yeah.
wanna kind of, as we
Yeah.
get to the end of this thing.
Yeah.
Because again, I've heard
Yeah,
from.
I'm just
Oh.
saying, we're going back to the thermostat issue. Has Linkspring or any of you guys ever done a use case study on a building that was done with thermostats in the same building, basically done with a building automation platform, to show that that you were actually able to deliver a lower cost of operation and energy, higher degree of tenant satisfaction, you know, side by side. Yeah, the thermostats went in for this cost. They were potentially cheaper than putting in the first cost of the building automation, but the operating costs actually went down substantially because with the building automation system, because it was sitting there making sure that, you know, the thermostats didn't get set at 72 all day long, all night long. You know, they actually did what the systems are supposed to do.
Steve, I did do some of that a while ago, and I think ultimately it's a different installer.
Mhm.
It's the electrical guy, it's a contractor, it's not someone who traditionally provides, and he goes and buys it from a supplier and installs it himself and puts it in. And
Yeah.
it's not the traditional system integrators or everyone who we would normally sell stuff to or doing it. It's the guy who goes down the wholesaler and buys one and then wires the thing in. It's lower cost, you know, put in, and that's the challenge of you know, the end customer who's buying the bit put in, even though he's doing it to a project.
So we're at the top of the hour.
Wow, how'd that happen?
Yeah, time flies when you're having fun. Anybody want to do a quick wrap up of what we've learned?
Well, I think like Mark kind of said that, you know, one of the things is that we asked the question, I think we will answer, said this is not a technology issue. You know, it's
Right.
still about a route, you know, getting it into the building in a way that you know, hurts people less, or is less of a big challenge technically. And I would argue that it's an opportunity for those that have provided traditional system building automation systems to expand their portfolio, so it really becomes an opportunity. to make it less of a leap for people to actually adopt, because they're already getting the BAS. And oh, by the way, you're getting an indoor air quality, you're getting a, your EV parking, and you get in, you're getting permitted, I don't know, but people occupancy sensors and stuff. So I think that's the opportunity, really.
Yeah, I agree, Roger. I'd like to see us rebrand our industry. We went from EMS, energy management, DDC to BAS. We should go to smart building systems.
Okay, well, we've gone from barriers to opportunities, so that's not a bad thing at all for an hour's worth of
In an
work.
hour, that's pretty good in an hour, yeah.
So we take the rest of the year
We've
off.
solved the world's problems.
Done.
right?
Thank you.
That's right.
All right.
See you
well,
next year.
well,
Yeah, anyone want a
thanks.
job as a UK Prime Minister? We're open to that.
Thank you.
No. All right.
So we'll solve that one.
All right. Thank you all. Thanks for the audience and the lively conversation there. And we'll put the video up tomorrow, and we will be excuse me. We will be back next week and continuing this discussion about overcoming barriers. So have a great week, everybody. Bye-bye.
Thanks.
Bye, guys.
See you guys.
Bye-bye.